Howdy, Immortalium here, and welcome back to another discussion video. This time I will be discussing something that I've been a bit hesitant to do. Like, it's something I've been considering for quite a while now, but I've been kind of wondering myself whether I was good enough to be able to make one of these videos. But a comment in a previous discussion video of mine has kind of given me the confidence to, give it a go. So that commenter is Vaden412. In my honest opinion, could be interesting, a video about the approach to the world of manga for beginners. Now, this is something I've been considering for a very long time, but I've been a bit hesitant, but let's give it a go. So, first thing first, one of the most important things to know about when you're getting into manga is that there are generally 4 demographics spoken about in terms of manga. First is shonen, shonen being aimed at 12 to 18-year-old boys. Shoujo, which is aimed at 12 to 18-year-old girls, Seinen, which is aimed at 18-plus men, and Josei, which is aimed at 18-plus women. Sometimes Kodomo, or children's manga, is also included, but that isn't generally discussed, so, technically there's 5 demographics, but generally it's the 4 that are discussed. And it's important to note that each demographic has its own style of storytelling, style of art, etc., etc., and which one you prefer will vary depending on who you are, what your personality is, what type of stories you like, etc., etc. So one of the very first things I would recommend you to do is do a bit of research into the various titles of each demographic and to kind of figure out which one you prefer the most. Although, in my personal opinion, any good story is a good story, no matter what demographic it is in. So yeah, that's what I open up with. The next thing, I better point out that this kind of beginner's video is aimed at kind of an English-speaking market, because that's the one I'm most familiar with. So if you're looking for me about French and German publishers and all that jazz, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to help you on that. But the next thing I think I should talk about is actual publishers, English language publishers of manga. Where can you get your manga? So the very first thing I want to discuss is Viz Media. Viz Media are very well known because of the fact that they publish some of the most popular titles in manga in the West. So like for a couple of examples of that would be like Naruto, Bleach, One Piece, Death Note, Hunter x Hunter, etc., etc. They're broken up, essentially their manga lines into imprints. So for example, the Shonen Jump and Shonen Jump Advanced. Shonen Jump is basically Shonen Jump titles, and then Shonen Jump Advanced is Shonen Jump titles that are a bit more, maybe a bit more mature. So like, whereas the Shonen Jump is aimed at 13+, Shonen Jump Advanced is aimed at 16+. They've also got a Weekly Shonen Sunday now imprint, which is basically titles from the magazine Weekly Shonen Sunday, which is published by Shogakukan instead. Then they also have Viz Signature, which is aimed at kind of mature titles, generally seinen titles, but occasionally there's like a shonen or a josei in that line. But in general it's seinen titles, so if you're looking for a kind of more mature storytelling, I would recommend you to go for Signature. They also have Shoujo Beat. Shoujo Beat is obviously where they have all their shoujo titles. A bit of josei in there as well, but generally shoujo titles. So if you're into like romance, kind of very pretty artwork, etc., etc., that'd be what I'd go for. And then, of course, if you're like a parent or if you're a kid or something like that, then I'd recommend you to check out Viz Kids, also known as Perfect Square now. They've got a variety of titles that are suitable for all ages, so that's kind of what I target. And then there's a couple of other imprints, but I won't discuss them right now. Generally, those are the imprints of Viz that you kind of want to focus on once you're getting into manga. They cover like pretty much all the demographics. The only imprint the only demographic not really represented by an imprint by Viz Media is josei, which is a shame. But there are a couple of josei titles in Viz Signature and in Shoujo Beat, so it's not like josei is completely unrepresented. Then after that we have Yen Press. Yen Press, in comparison to a lot of the other companies, are a bit more recent, have a good bit of dealing with, Square Enix in particular, but also a good few other publishers from Japan. And they're pretty varied when it comes to, their titles. Of course, like most publishers, they have their, shonen battle manga series, but they also have like their comedy manga, like Azumanga Daioh. They have some seinen titles like Bride Story and High School of the Dead. They have my personal favourite manga of all time, with the Light Racing Autistic Child, which is a josei. And speaking of josei, they also have Bunny Drop. So, in general, they're pretty varied. Also, they've launched a proper imprint recently for light novels. I know this is kind of a manga one, but I sometimes kind of let the light novel manga thing bleed in together. Light novels are basically prose novels, which have like manga style pictures every so often. And you know, they've been popularly adapted into, you know, many mediums recently, like Toradora, Golden Time, Sword Art Online, Excel World, etc, etc. Durara, Yenon, that's the name of the imprint, and you can get a variety of titles there. So basically there's a good bit of variety from Yen Press. Not quite as many imprints as Viz Media, mind you, but, you know, decent variety. Then we have Dark Horse, Dark Horse Manga, I should point out. Many of you will probably be familiar with Dark Horse, the comic releaser company. Sorry, that's very bad grammar. But they've released a lot of popular titles, you know, in the West. And they have a manga imprint, which, you know, many people don't seem to be aware of. The most popular title from them is Lone Wolf and Cub, which is a classic samurai manga. But they've released a good variety of other works. Like, for example, right now they seem to be almost the sole distributor for Clamp in the West. So, like, if you're really looking into, you know, Clamp titles, whether that be shoujo or seinen or shonen, you're going to find a variety of titles from Dark Horse. So that'd be a good choice. Besides that, you know, Dark Horse are pretty good generally for omnibuses. I personally find some of their single tankobon releases a bit expensive, which is why I generally go for their omnibuses instead. But they're generally pretty high quality omnibuses. I like them. Plus they've got a good variety of kind of more adult titles. They seem to focus more on the kind of seinen than some other publishers. Speaking of publishers that focus on seinen, I would also recommend Vertical. Vertical released a lot of seinen titles. Like, for example, they released a good amount of Osamu Tezuka's, when I say a good amount of, like, nowhere near his catalogue, but, you know, a good variety of titles from it. Mainly seinen, but also including some shoujo, some shonen, etc, etc. Besides that, they've released some very interesting other titles like Utsubora, Sakuran, Pink, etc, etc. So Vertical, if you're looking for a publisher that don't generally publish quite conventional manga, I wouldn't go so far as to say that many of their manga are avant-garde or anything. They're not quite. They're still pretty mainstream in Japan, but they're not like the really big popular titles over here. And, you know, I find a lot of their titles really interesting and intriguing, so I would highly recommend that you check out Vertical stuff. The one issue I have with them is that they tend to go out of print relatively fast, but I guess for like a smaller publisher, that's to be expected. Then we have Kodansha. Kodansha recently struck gold when they released Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan selling enormous amounts for them. But they've also got a variety of other titles, like their previous most successful title was Sailor Moon. So if you're into Sailor Moon, definitely pick up some stuff from Kodansha. They've also got access to a whole bunch of other stuff from Del Rey, which was a previous manga publisher. So, like, they've re-released like Negima and Love Hina and all that jazz. Also recently they released a very popular title, Vinland Saga. When I say very popular, I mean very critically acclaimed. I'm not sure how the sales are exactly for it. It might be kind of middle-ish. But, you know, Kodansha is a very interesting publisher. I know a friend of mine is very interested in a lot of the shoujo titles that are released from Kodansha. So definitely they're one to keep an eye on, particularly due to how successful they've been recently, due to the kind of 1-2 punch of Attack on Titan and Sailor Moon. So that's kind of a lot of the manga publishers in English. There are a couple of others that I haven't touched on, like Digital Manga and Seven Seas, but you can probably do your research on that yourself. I kind of covered the big boys themselves. So yeah, so those are the publishers. Then I guess the only other thing I should probably point out about, you know, beginning into manga is the whole kind of how do you get manga. Now, I did an actual video on this a couple of weeks ago about, you know, how to kind of save money on buying manga. My first recommendation was to buy manga titles online on like Book Depository, Amazon, etc, etc, because generally they're much cheaper than the recommended retail price of brick and mortar stores. But I actually got a lot of people, you know, telling me, you know, oh, what about used bookstores? What about like Forbidden Planet would do 3-for-2 titles? When I went to Forbidden Planet up in Dublin recently, when I say recently, I'm talking about back when I went to the MCM Expo in Dublin, so that would have been like last summer. I mean, combining like all the titles together and then getting the 3-for-2 offer, put them ever so slightly more than online. Now, I don't know what the prices are like in Britain or England or wherever else Forbidden Planet is, but to me, the Forbidden Planet up in Dublin wasn't that well priced, even with the 3-for-2 offer. It wasn't bad. I mean, if you're, for some reason, don't have access to the internet, that wouldn't be a bad choice for the Dublin one. In England, maybe, yeah, the Forbidden Planet is way better value, but, you know, I don't know. That's from my personal experience. Used bookstores, yeah, you can get some very good deals from there. I've heard amazing stories of people getting, like, manga volumes for 50 cents and €1, you know, in some other countries. Actually, 50 pence or a pound, or 50 cents or a dollar, etc., etc. But where I am, in Cork, there's the only used bookstore that sells manga is generally like this. It's called like Vibes and Scribes, and generally they charge like a $5 for each volume, which is cheaper in general than online, as you can get some pretty good out-of-print titles sometimes there. But in general, it's not an amazing saving for me. But, you know, like, I'm sure that used bookstores actually charge very low prices for manga volumes, etc., etc., would be an excellent option to begin your kind of journey into manga. So that's kind of my a crash course, you could say, for a person who's getting into manga. And if you guys think I've missed anything, you know, any kind of things that would help a person who's beginning to get into manga, etc., etc., leave in the comments below. I would absolutely love to hear it. And as usual, leave me, you know, recommendations for what my next discussion video should be on. You know, I always find that really helpful. And sometimes I have ideas, but I'm not really confident about actually doing them. So, like, if I hear you guys actually recommending them to me, that kind of gives me the confidence to actually do it. So, yeah, like, I absolutely want to hear what you guys would like to see me discuss, etc., etc. So, you know, that's really helpful. So hopefully this video was entertaining and you got a lot of useful information out of it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.